Was this past Saturday in the Big 12 a terrible day for Big 12 football? We're going to talk about that in this show. I'm also going to do my Week 12 Big 12 tier rankings. I'm going to rank each team in tiers based on their performance in this past weekend's games to tell you where they stand. And I'm going to talk about a college football playoff scenario that the Big 12 could find themselves in that would be worst case scenario. So in this episode, in this live episode, which is brought to you by BetUS Online Sportsbook and Casino and Cats, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner, we're going to talk about all three of those tonight. I appreciate all of you for joining me. What is up, Philip Royball, who is in the house already watching on X? Before we get on with the show, though, I do have to give a quick shout out to one of those sponsors I just mentioned. So hang around. I'll be back in about 35 seconds or so. Since 1931, the attorneys at Cats, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner have been the voice for victims who have suffered serious injury or death. They have a fierce passion for truth and justice and a sincere compassion for those who have been wronged by others. Whether you have been in a car accident or fighting with an insurance company, or you or a loved one has suffered serious injury or death due to medical negligence, we will ensure your voice is heard loud and clear. Cats, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner will ensure there is justice for all West Virginians because we are your lawyer, your voice. Visit us at yourlawyeryourvoice.com. What is up, and welcome into this live edition of Couz's Corner. Belly yourself up to the bar, make yourself comfortable. Let me pour you out a shot of top-shelf college football news and analysis. This show focuses on not just West Virginia, but I'm going to talk about the entire Big 12 tonight. West Virginia will be a part of it, and you'll see what I mean at the end in the last segment, but it's mainly focusing on the Big 12 as a whole. And why, in this past weekend, first segment actually is talking about this past weekend and why it was a really bad weekend for the conference. Now, I saw John Kurtz's show earlier in the day, and he talked about how it, the Holy War game between Utah and BYU and the controversy that surrounded it after the game and all that was actually good for the conference because of the publicity it brought, and because Brett Yormark wants to market this league. He's an entertainer. He wants the Big 12 to be entertaining, and all that's great, and I agree with all that. But when you look at on the field, it was an absolutely horrible week for the Big 12, in my opinion, and here's why. A couple reasons. Number one, you have an undefeated team sitting there in BYU who right now is carrying the torch for the conference potentially. We still have 3 games to go, so there's still time. But right now, they are carrying the torch for the league as far as the highest possible seeding in the college football playoff. And last weekend, we heard the executive director of the CFP, College Football Playoff Committee, Selection Committee, talk about the eye test. One of the person in the media asked him, well, how do you separate Miami from BYU? One's in the ACC, one's in the Big 12. They're both undefeated. He said the eye test. Well, I'm here to tell you BYU did not pass the eye test with that ugly win against Utah. BYU did not play well in that game. They barely squeaked out a win. It took a controversial call, which I didn't think was all that controversial, but nonetheless, controversial call for them to maintain possession, move down the field, kick a field goal, win the game. They technically should have probably lost that game, to be honest with you. But they didn't. They held on to win against our arch rival Utah, who happens to be a bad football team this year, at least on one side of the ball offensively. They're a bad offensive football team. So BYU looked bad in a win, so they did not pass the eye test. I'll be anxious to see where the committee ranks them this week. They did win, so they may move up, and Miami lost, so maybe that helps them. But I don't look for them to move up much, if at all, this week because of the way they won that game in Utah. All right. The other reason it was a bad weekend is your other team one of the other teams who were at the top of the standings, who had the second highest ranking in the college football playoff, was Iowa State. I think they were sitting there at 17 or something last week in the rankings. They lose for the second week in a row, and they lose to one of the worst teams in the conference in Kansas. So your top 2 teams in the college football playoff both lose. I'm sorry, they both look bad. One looks bad in a win. One loses a game. Not only did they lose, but they lose to one of the worst teams in the conference. Not good. Not good for the Big 12. Now, Colorado won. So that, you could say that was positive for the league, maybe. Maybe we'll see where they move up in the CFP standings this week. But I don't think it was a good week for the Big 12 when it comes to how they're going to be perceived nationally in the rankings. As a matter of fact, I haven't looked at the AP rankings, but I think based on some conversations I've had with people, I think they might have actually dropped this week outside the top 12 in the AP poll after winning a game. That's the perception of the top team in the league, which can tell you the perception of the conference. It has the perception to those on the outside as a weak conference. And the way things are playing out, it's almost making those people look right. Now, I know we talk about the parity, and yes, it's exciting. As a fan, it's exciting to have all the parity. You don't know which team is going to win on any given day. But from the national perception perspective, it's not a good look for our league. And we'll see how the pollsters, even more importantly, the CFP committee continues to look at this league going forward. But that's the reason I think it was a bad weekend for the Big 12. The ugly win by BYU over Utah, and then Iowa State, the second highest rated team, losing to Kansas. Now, in the second segment of the show, I'm going to go ahead and do my tier rankings. Then in the last segment, I'm going to talk about why there's a worst case scenario that could unfold for the Big 12 as it relates to the college football playoff and what team gets in and who or doesn't get in. And we'll talk about that later. But let's go ahead and pull up the tier rankings. This is last year's tier rankings. Now, for those of you who might be new here, the way I do this is the rankings these are the rankings from last week, okay? Because I want you to see where they were and then how far they drop or go up based on last week's rankings. As you can see, I had 3 teams as top shelf with Iowa State, BYU, and Colorado, right? Then I had Texas Tech and Kansas State as contenders. I had Arizona State, Cincinnati, and West Virginia as in the conversation. I had TCU, Houston, UCF, BYU as pretenders. I had Utah and Kansas as bottom shelf teams. And then I had Oklahoma State and Arizona bringing up the rear as the well teams. Now, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go game by game in the Big 12. I'll rate each team that participated in those games, put them in what tier I think they deserve to be in, and then we'll talk about the teams who had buys and whether or not they move. All right, and then I'll get to comments. Let me go ahead and check the comment section real quick to make sure I don't have any super chats, and then also check in and see if any of my VIP, got some VIP members here in the house. I've got Browns and Beers. He says, I was never quite in agreement with your assessment for a while of Cincy being in a tier above West Virginia. Glad to finally hopefully see the end of that this week. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, disagreement is welcome here, man. But yeah, totally understandable. I actually thought they were a pretty good team. Chris D says that last possession was bonkers. 3 4th downs in a row. Yikes. Definitely was. BYU was ranked last in the Big 12, and here they sat. You're absolutely right, Philip. Got to give hats off to BYU, man. They've proved a lot of people wrong, including me. Chris D says it was more than just a holding call, though. True. We've got Chris D also says, yeah, but I think KU's record is deceiving. True. That they're actually pretty good. And he thinks the Big 12 is the weakest of all the P4 conferences. I think it's an argument between them and the ACC. I think the argument could be made for either one. But I think they're definitely no better than third right now. What's up, Daniel Gigax in the house? All right. Let's go ahead and do these tier rankings real quick. Let's start off with the game against my West Virginia Mountaineers and the Cincinnati Bearcats. As you see, both of them are in the conversation right now, or were in the conversation last week. West Virginia wins the game 31-24 to move to 5-4 overall on the year and 4-2 in the Big 12. Now, they are still technically in the Big 12 conference race. Now, they have to win out. They have to win their last 3 games over Baylor, UCF, and Texas Tech, and they have to have a little bit of help. But they are technically still in the race and have a shot at getting to Arlington. Believe it or not. In this game, West Virginia was able to win because of one thing. They forced 3 turnovers in this game. 2 of those turnovers led directly to touchdowns. There was a pick 6 and a scoop and score. Both of those led to touchdowns, and then they also got a field goal off of a fumble recovery. All three of the turnovers were committed by Brennan Sorsby, the quarterback for Cincinnati. A special shout out to Fatorma Mulba, the nose tackle for West Virginia, had 13 tackles in the game. How often do you see a nose tackle get 13 tackles in a game? Very, very rarely. He did. Great game by him. Anthony Wilson, the safety who had the pick six, also had 11 tackles to go along with that pick six. And then offensively, Nico Marchio, who was playing in place of the injured Garrett Green, went 9 of 15 passing for 156 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. The pick was a little bit fluky, so but the problem is they scored on the very next play. Offensively, West Virginia's defense gave up a big play for a touchdown, so it did end up hurting them. And West Virginia was only able to muster 92 yards on the ground. However, in this strange game where West Virginia's defense had so many takeaways and touchdowns, West Virginia only had 43 snaps in the game. So not a whole lot of opportunities, but some of that was their own fault. They didn't execute on the opportunities they did have. The offense did not look good. In my opinion, one of the worst performances they've had in quite some time. But West Virginia did win the game. It was their first game under new D coordinator, Jeff Couz. They did force turnovers, which they had not been doing much this year. And man, even though I still have a negative mindset on West Virginia, you know what? I started to move them up to contenders, but I don't really think they are. They still only have the sixth best odds to win the league, according to BetUS, and they're still not playing really. They played really good on special teams too. I need to add that in there. Played really, really well on special teams in multiple phases of special teams: punting, kickoff return, kick return, punt return, all played well, but their offense was so bad, and their defense still gave up quite a bit of yards. So I'm going to leave them right now as in the conversation. I don't really feel like I should move them up after that ugly win. All right. As far as Cincy goes, they dropped to 4-5. They dropped to 5-4, so they're even with West Virginia as far as overall record, but they dropped to 3-3 in the league, which drops them out of Big 12 title contention. At least, maybe not technically, but it pretty much does. Corey Kiner ran the ball 25 times for 91 yards and a touchdown. He had a decent day. Brennan Sorsby was 25 of 36 passing for 279 yards, a touchdown in that interception, which was a pick six. But he also fumbled the ball 2 times, and both of those led to West Virginia points. They had 436 total yards of offense, 279 passing and 157 rushing, so they were fairly balanced offensively. West Virginia was kind of playing a bend but don't break defense, which quite honestly is what they've been doing about all year. And the Cincinnati defense held West Virginia to only 92 yards rushing and only 9 first downs. Again, now West Virginia only had 40-some snaps to play, but had they executed better, they would have gotten more snaps, right? So I don't really see that as a valid excuse. But they lost the game. Cincinnati they committed 3 turnovers. I have to move them down. They lost to West Virginia, so they shouldn't be on the same level as them. So I'm now putting them as a pretender. Maybe they're not as good as I thought they were. The next game for the Big 12 was Iowa State at Kansas. Now, this is one of the surprise games of the weekend. Iowa State loses their second game in a row. By a score of 45-36. At Kansas. They now are 7-2 on the year, 4-2 in the Big 12. They still technically have a shot and a path to the Big 12 championship game. But it just got harder. Jalen Noel, I guess as he pronounces it, 8 receptions, 167 yards and 2 touchdowns. Great performance by him. Rocco Becht was 24 of 37, 383 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a pick. Had 461 yards of total offense. So their offense did the job. Their offense played pretty well. Problem is they only had 78 yards on the ground, so they had to rely on everything through the air, which made them one-dimensional. And the other problem was defensively. They gave up 532 yards of offense to Kansas. Gave up 7 first downs on 13 third down attempts by the Jayhawks. So Kansas was 7 of 13 on third downs. The Iowa State defense could not get off the field. So Kansas basically just outscored them because Iowa State couldn't stop them. And Iowa State they're no longer a top shelf team. They are now 4-2 in the league. Their road to Arlington is now tougher. So I'm dropping them down 1 tier to a contender. The team they played, Kansas, they improved to 3-6 overall, 2-4 in league play. They might be the best 3-6 football team in the country. I think all but one game that they have lost has been by single digits, most of them by one touchdown or less. The offense in this game put up 532 yards, 295 passing, 237 rushing. Really, really good day for Jalen Daniels, or a pretty good day anyway. His completion percentage wasn't great, but he had a good day from a yardage standpoint and a scoring standpoint. He was 12 of 24, 295 yards, 2 touchdowns, 68 rushing yards, and a touchdown there on the ground. Another 100-yard-plus day for Devin Neal with 2 scores. Quentin Skinner, the receiver, had 4 catches for 135 yards and a touchdown. So big play after big play. The team's average yards per reception was 24.6. So it was a big play day for Kansas on the day for Jalen Daniels and his receivers. That is why Iowa State lost this game. And then defensively, Melo Dotson for Kansas had a 25-yard pick six as well, which really, if you look at the scoring, was probably the biggest difference in the game. And Kansas finally gets a win after so many close calls. They finally get that second conference win. But man, they're 2-4 in league play. Gosh, I'm just not. They're still a bottom shelf team to me. Until they do better and win more than 2 games, I still have to leave them at bottom shelf, even though they did pull off a really, really big upset. Next game, Colorado at Texas Tech. Colorado I had on top shelf last week. They win the game 41-27, moved to 7-2 overall and 5-1 in the conference. Offensively, they put up 351 total yards. 291 of those was through the air, with Shedeur Sanders, who was 30 of 43 with 291 and 3 TDs. Travis Hunter had another big day, 9 catches for 99 yards. Now, Colorado was only able to rush for 60 yards on the day and only had 2.2 yards per carry. So their rushing offense still continues to be just below average. But their passing game is so good. They have so many weapons on the outside. Shedeur Sanders is so accurate with the football. They don't really have to run it a lot. They only need to run the ball enough to keep the defense honest. That's what they do. And so far, it's working. And defensively, Colorado don't look now, but Colorado can play some defense all of a sudden. They forced 3 turnovers on the day against the Red Raiders. And they held Texas Tech to 2.5 yards per carry on the ground, and that is with star running back Taj Brooks. So a really good day there for the Buffaloes. The next game we're going to look at, the next team we're going to look at, and I'll rate both of these when I'm done here. Texas Tech, their opponent, they dropped to 6-4 overall and 4-3 in the Big 12, so they're pretty much out of the Big 12 conference race. Offensively, they put up 388 yards, and 275 of those were through the air. Baron Morton was 24 of 40, 275, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Taj Brooks had 131 yards on the ground. They did commit 9 penalties in the game. And by the way, Colorado committed 14 penalties. So a lot of penalties in this game. So a very ugly game from that regard. Texas Tech's defense did hold Colorado to 2 of 13 on third down. So there were some good things on the Texas Tech side of the ball defensively, but not enough to win. As far as ranking these teams, I'm going to put Colorado. I have to leave them at top shelf. They're right now sitting in second place in the league with only 1 league loss. Right, if they win out, they get to Arlington. It's that simple. And then Texas Tech, I had them as a contender. They have now dropped to 4-3 in league play. They're no longer in the conversation, so I have to take them down 2 tiers to a pretender. All right. Let's move over to the next game that was on the docket. UCF versus Arizona. UCF lost the game 35-31. I'm sorry, Arizona State, not Arizona, Arizona State. UCF loses 31-35. They dropped 4-6 overall and 2-5 in the league. Offensively, another pretty good day, especially on the ground. 406 total yards, had 4.8 yards per carry, 177 rushing yards. R.J. Harvey, 25 carries, 127 yards, 3 touchdowns. Just continues to be one of the best running backs in all of college football. Dylan Risk, I guess is his name. Quarterback was 24 of 34 for 229 and an interception. They are getting pretty decent play out of him. they may have finally found themselves a quarterback. Defensively, they held Arizona State to only 99 yards rushing, but the caveat, Arizona State did not have their best player, Cam Scatterbo. He was out for the game. Arizona State did not play all that well offensively, but they did just enough to win. I'll get to them in a minute, but UCF basically lost this game because they could not stop. They just couldn't make enough plays. They had too many blunders. They gave up a special teams touchdown. They had a pick six. There's too many mistakes for them to overcome, and they still only lost by 4 points. So, and then we'll go to Arizona State next, and then we'll rank them. Arizona State moves up to 7-2 on the year, 4-2 in league play. They just played a cleaner football game than UCF did. They had like I mentioned, a special teams touchdown. I think it was a block kick. They had a pick six in the game. Committed only 5 penalties to UCF's 9 penalties. Had no turnovers in the game, and then Leavitt had Sam Leavitt, the quarterback, was 16 of 25 for 161 yards and 3 touchdowns. So he had a good day. And then running back Kyson Brown, I hope I said his name right, had 18 carries for 73 yards on the day. So even though their best player was out, they found a way to win the game. That's what good teams do, right? So Arizona State right now, I have them in the conversation. I think that's where I'm going to leave them. They have an extremely tough schedule coming up. I'm not ready to put them up as a contender just yet, even though technically they are. I'm going to put them in West Virginia kind of right there in the same category. Now, they're playing better football, at least based on my eyes. They're playing better football than what West Virginia's playing. But I'm still not ready to put them up into the contender category just yet. All right, as far as UCF goes, they're 2-4 in the league, or actually 2-5 in the league. I've got to move them down to a bottom shelf. They're just not playing good enough football right now to be any better than that. So let's move over to the final game on the docket, and that was Oklahoma State versus TCU. No, I'm sorry, there's 2 more. Oklahoma State, TCU. Oklahoma State lost the game 38-13. Terrible game for them. They're 3-6 overall, 0-6 in league play. No doubt where they're going to be, right? They turned the ball over 3 times, only had 135 yards rushing. Now, Ollie Gordon did a good job. He had 121 of those himself. Alan Bowman, 19 of 29 for 141 yards, a touchdown, and another interception. Brennan Presley had a good day, 10 catches, 75 yards, so another big day for him. Brennan Presley is quietly becoming one of the best receivers, or maybe even overall best players in the history of Oklahoma State Cowboy football. Young man deserves to be considered for the All-American team, in my opinion. That's Oklahoma State. TCU wins the game, obviously. They moved to 6-4 on the year, 4-3 in Big 12 play. They were 6 of 10 on third down was TCU. They had 468 total yards of offense, 293 passing, 175 rushing. The defense forced 3 Oklahoma State turnovers. Quarterback Josh Hoover was 26 of 35 for 286 yards and a touchdown. And then J.P. Richardson, the wide receiver, caught 7 balls for 100 yards. And TCU only punted the ball 1 time in the entire game, so they just were pretty much able to do what they wanted to offensively and move the football. I'm obviously leaving Oklahoma State in the well. They're 0-6, the only winless team in the conference. There's no doubt where they are. As far as TCU, they do improve to 4-3. They're technically not a contender. They're not even in the conversation, so I'm going to leave them where they are as a pretender. They definitely are better than bottom shelf, but they're not in the conversation for the Big 12 title right now, so I'm leaving them as a pretender. And then finally, the Holy War, Utah versus BYU, or BYU at Utah, technically. BYU wins the game 22-21, very controversial fashion. We all know about that. They are now 9-0 overall, 6-0 in league play, and they won this game like they have most games with defense. They forced 3 turnovers on the defensive side of the ball and only gave up 259 total yards of offense to Utah, and that was the difference in the game. Offensively, didn't do much. They committed 10 penalties. Jay Kretslaff was 15 of 33 for 219 yards. L.J. Martin rushed it 11 times, only 68 yards. Now, they did also have a special teams touchdown by Keelan Marion, who returned a punt for a touchdown. So that helped them out as well. I have to consider that. That's what BYU does, man. They don't look pretty when they win games. They simply just win with tough defense and good special teams. That's how they win. They're not going to wow you. They're, like I said earlier in the video, in the first segment, they're probably not going to pass the eye test most times, but they just find ways to win. As far as Utah goes, and then I'll rank both teams when I'm done here. Utah loses the game. They dropped to 4-5 overall, 1-5 in the league. They did hold BYU to 1 of 12 on third down, which is a remarkable number, and only 219 yards of total offense. But offensively, they could do absolutely nothing very much. Brandon Rose, the quarterback, was 12 of 21 for 112 yards, 2 touchdowns, also threw a pick. And Mekhi Bernard, 17 carries, 78 yards. They were 6 of 12 on third down offensively, but they just could not score, and just too many mistakes, turning the ball over, continue to not be able to do anything through the air. Just can't. They don't have good quarterback play. It's that simple. All their eggs were in the Cam Rising basket. Cam Rising was injured. It has basically turned their season upside down. So where do I rank these teams? BYU obviously still undefeated. I have to leave them at top shelf. They may not have looked top shelf, but they're undefeated, so that's where they deserve to be. And Utah, still a bottom shelf team. I'm not going to put them in the well just yet because they have such a good defense. They still have arguably the best defense in the conference, or at least one of them. So for that alone, I'm leaving them at least as a bottom shelf team. Now, for the teams who were on a bye, Kansas State, they're technically still a contender with only 2 conference losses, so they're staying put. Houston, since they had a bye, I guess I'll leave them where they are. Baylor, I'm leaving where they are. That's it. And Arizona, I'm leaving Arizona in the well because they are also a bad football team. So to summarize, the top shelf teams in the Big 12 are undefeated BYU and 1-loss Colorado. The contenders, who are still in the running for the Big 12 and have the easiest path outside of BYU and Colorado, are Kansas State and Iowa State. 2 teams who are still in the conversation for the Big 12 championship, but very unlikely are going to make it to Arlington, are Arizona State and West Virginia, who both won their games over the weekend. Pretenders are TCU, Houston, Baylor, Cincinnati, Texas Tech. Teams that have decent conference records. Some even have winning conference records. But they are not even – they are out of the conference race. Bottom shelf teams who are just teams with 1 or 2 wins in the league are Utah, Kansas, and UCF. And then the well teams, who I think the 2 worst teams, winless Oklahoma State and Arizona, who only has 1 win and have lost, 5 in a row. So, yeah. Those are my Big 12 tier rankings for this week. Now, let me get to the comment section, see what you guys have to say, and then we'll get over to the next segment of the show, which is the worst case scenario that could be in play for the Big 12. But first, let's see. Make sure I'm not missing any super chats. Remember, guys, if you want to take the conversation in a certain direction, be sure to drop me a super chat. Hit the $sign if you're on YouTube, obviously. That doesn't work on X. If you're on YouTube and you want to send the chat in a certain direction or talk about something else, hit the $sign near the chat box where it says say something or comment. Post your comment there. It'll highlight it for me, and I'll be sure to read it on air. And if it's a question, I will answer it. And then, obviously, my VIP members who have the badge beside their name, I'll read their comments as well if it's relevant to the conversation. Chris D says definitely agree with holding, but it was the 2 previous plays that make it controversial in my opinion. That's fair. We have WVU Fan 13 joining the conversation. He says, just a question. Do you see any Big 12 team competing with the top 12? Yeah, I think they can compete with some of the top 12. Now, can they compete with the top teams in the country? Probably not. But I do think the top team, I think a team like Colorado was so good offensively. I think they can compete with just about anybody. I hate to say this because I know BYU's undefeated, but I'm not sure BYU's as good as their record indicates. But yeah, I mean, I think their defense is good enough, I think, to compete with a lot of the teams in the country. And I think, I thought if you'd asked me 3 weeks ago, I'd have told you Iowa State could have competed with anybody in the country, but that's not looking too good right now. For what they're on a downhill slide. They're battling some injuries and whatnot. So yes, I do think the Big 12 could compete with the top 12. Absolutely. Can they compete with the top 4 or 5? I don't know. I guess that's yet to be determined. He also, WV Fan 13 also says that's life in the Big 12. We beat each other up until there's only one team standing with 2 losses or 3. We'll never get respect for ranking or playoff, and that's a fair point. And that's actually kind of what I'm going to touch on in the next segment. And Chris thinks BYU's a pretender. Before I get into the next segment, though, I do need to give a shout out to my other sponsor. And speaking of the shout out, the odds for this week are obviously out. And right now, one of the games that I see that really intrigued me is the Utah-Colorado game. Right now, Colorado is -11 at home against the Utes. Over-under is 46.5, which is pretty low considering Colorado's offense. But here, it's an intriguing matchup because Utah has one of the best defenses and one of the best passing defenses in the league, but their offense just sputters and can do hardly nothing. And because of that, I think Colorado's offense is good enough to score on Utah. They may not score as many as they're used to scoring, but they're going to put up some points, and I'm not sure Utah can because Colorado's defense is pretty darn good. So I'm just not sure Utah will be able to stay within 2 touchdowns of Colorado. So for that reason, I'm taking Colorado to cover on this one. And I'm going to put a $20 bet on this. So if you want to place a bet on that game or any game for that matter, check out our friends over at BetUS Online Sportsbook. Right now, they have a special going on where you get a 150% bonus on your very first deposit with promo code YouTube150 at checkout. Again, promo code YouTube150 at checkout gets you 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit. You can also get 125% bonus on your next 2 deposits, up to $2,000. Make sure that you play responsibly, and remember, you must be 18 years of age or older. And I'm going to throw this one in there this time. If you or anyone you know has a gambling problem, please call 1-800-GAMBLER for help. There is help available for those who struggle. All right, now, the last segment of the show, we're going to talk about the worst-case scenario for the Big 12 as far as the college football playoff. I mentioned earlier when I was doing the tier rankings how West Virginia technically still has a shot at getting to Arlington, right, to play in the Big 12 championship game. And obviously, if they get there, they have a chance to win it. Now, it's a long shot. I think I saw a number earlier. It's only like 2%. I think the odds over at BetUS are plus 4,000. So it's a long shot. But they do have a path. They need to win out, and they need a little bit of help. They need Colorado to lose one time. They need Kansas State to lose one time. And they need Arizona State, I think, to lose one time. So, but the way this Big 12 conference is, and as chaotic as it is, all of that is possible. So there is still a path for West Virginia to get to Arlington. But let's just say, hypothetically, let's just look to the future and assume, let's just play a little game. Let's assume West Virginia gets to Arlington. They win out. They get the help they need. They finish 7-2 in the league, and they go to Arlington to play BYU for the conference championship game. Let's say BYU is either 12-0 or 11-1, and they're undefeated in league play. Or I'm sorry, either no losses or 1 loss in league play. Either way, right? If West Virginia happens to sneak up and win that game, now there's a chance West Virginia is still not ranked in the college football playoff poll potentially, and if they are, they would be ranked maybe in the 20s. They would be ranked pretty low if that's the case, more than likely. Let's say they sneak up and win the game. You have a 9-4 football team winning your conference. It's possible in that scenario that the Big 12 could actually get left completely out of the college football playoff. Now, it's a long shot. But, I mean, you have Boise State right now ranked. I mean, I'm doing this show just a few minutes before the second week of the CFP rankings come out. But as last week, they had Boise State at number 12. They could move up even further. So, and they could win the Mountain West Conference. So they could be ahead of the Big 12 champion in that case. They could end up being ahead of the Big 12 champion anyway. But that's another conversation for another day. And there may not be another Big 12 team within reach. And only in that scenario, only the conference champion would likely get in. BYU is likely not getting in if they drop a game to West Virginia. I mean, they were ranked 9th last week as an 8-0 undefeated team because of their eye test and strength of schedule. So if they drop a game to a team who's 8-4 at the time, it might drop them completely out of the top 12. West Virginia in that scenario would be the only team to have a chance to get into the playoff, more than likely, as the conference champion. And it's possible that not only Boise State, but look at Army. What if Army's sitting there undefeated right now, and last week we're ranked 25th in the country in the college football playoff? Well, what if Army happens to beat Notre Dame and win out and win their conference? Then what happens? Could we actually get the Big 12? It's all already assumed that the Big 12 is only going to have one team in the playoff anyway, right? They're not getting two in. They're not getting an at-large team in. Those spots are going to go to the SEC, the Big 10, and maybe the ACC, but more than likely the Big 10 and SEC are going to get most, if not all, the at-large spots. So it's very possible the Big 12, it's actually likely the Big 12 only gets one team in, but it's actually possible the Big 12 gets left completely out of the college football playoff picture. Again, that is a long shot scenario, but it is possible, and it would be terrible for the league. Now, it would be good for my team, obviously, West Virginia, but that would be a terrible, and boy, would that not be the most Neil Brown, West Virginia thing ever, to finally win the Big 12, which would be, look, it would still be an honor to win the league, and would still be a huge accomplishment. Don't get me wrong. But if they would win the league and get left out of the college football playoff, that would be insane. But in that scenario, I think that's the only way that happens, because I think any of the other teams who win it, I think they're ranked. I think they're getting in. I think an Iowa State could get in. I think Colorado's getting in if they win it. I think BYU's getting in if they win it. Arizona State, even, if they win the rest of their games, or even maybe could even drop one more depending on who that's to. They probably get in if they win it. But in West Virginia may be the only conference team who could win the league and be left out potentially. Now, again, a lot of other things would have to happen. You'd have to have a team like Army probably go undefeated along with Boise State's current positioning. But anyway, I just thought that was very interesting. Not necessarily a positive thing for the conference, but it is something I've been thinking about a lot lately as I think about West Virginia's potential path to the playoff or, Big 12 championship. And yes, I know the college football playoff show is coming up here shortly. That's why I wanted to do this show earlier than I was originally going to do this show at like 8 o'clock. And then I thought, I'll do it earlier so that everybody can get to watch the college football playoff. And for us West Virginia fans, we may be able to watch our women's team play tonight in basketball. So anyway, Chris is asking me a question here. I'm sorry, Chris, I missed it. Chris D, if you deposit $320, 100, you get 150. Let me go back and look. If you deposit 100, you get 150. Let me go back and look at I wasn't looking at that when you asked the question, man. So I apologize. Let me go back and look. Passed it up somehow. Here it is. Yeah, I'm not sure. Man, I'm not sure what I missed something somewhere. I'm not sure what you're referring to there. My bad, man. My bad. Yes, it would be WV Fan 13. Like I said, that's our only hope as a West Virginia fan. Yeah, you do get 125% on your next two, 150% on your first one. If you use promo code YouTube 150, make sure you use that promo code. Barano Beef Dip in the house. Say sorry I had to step away and missed it. If you addressed you going to the better game and me getting to rub your head for good luck. I am supposed to be there, Barano Beef Dip. As far as I know, I will be there unless something changes. I am planning to go. Yes. I do have a ticket. I don't really have anything else, guys. This is going to be a pretty short one tonight. I covered quite a bit, though, in that 39 minutes or 40 minutes, so to speak. Again, if you didn't catch the whole show, it will be up for you to watch on demand. You can go back and watch the first 2 segments where I talked about why it was such a bad weekend for the Big 12 this past week in college football, and also I went through my Week 12 Big 12 tier rankings. So you can check it all out. If you're watching on X, please come over to my YouTube channel, Couz's Corner, and check out my past shows, my past uploads. Check out my, the on-demand videos that I've left up over there. Also, don't forget, I have the Hoops from the Hills channel now where I cover West Virginia basketball. Just uploaded a video over there today talking about the new commit that West Virginia got, the 4-star young man that committed to the Mountaineers and Coach Darren DeVries today. If you want to go to Hoops from the Hills and check that out, I would appreciate the support over there. I have a couple other creators also doing some work for me. Don't forget go to couzscorner.com /shop. There are some shopping you can do there. You can get yourself some Fanatics gear. You can get yourself some Couz's Corner merch, and you can get yourself some ONIT athlete trading cards. There are links to all those sites. All of that would really support me and what I do here. Also, really, I guess the biggest thing you can do, just share, like the video, man. Like this live stream, like this video. If you thought I earned it, if you really enjoyed the content, please hit the like button. It really drives that YouTube algorithm. I don't promote that as much as I used to because I think most people understand it. But yeah, the thumbs up really help. The comments help. If you comment give your opinion on these. Has the game already started? I thought it started at 8. Crap. All right. Sorry about that. Yeah, the West Virginia Pitt game, women's game is already on. I thought it started at 8 o'clock. Anyway, yes, the BetUS offer, Chris, my bad. Yes, if you deposit 100, you get 125. If you use promo code YouTube 150, you'll actually get 150. Yeah, 150 and then 125 on your next ones. So, yes. So sorry. I somehow that skipped over me, man. I guess the timing of it. By the time I saw your comment, I was already past the ad read portion and didn't connect the dots. But anyway, well, I really appreciate everybody tuning into the show. I'm going to get off of here, call it a night here. As you can see, I'm in a hotel traveling for work, so I'm going to get off of here, chill a little bit, maybe watch the rest of the women's game, catch the college football playoff show, and I'll catch you all next time. Hope the rest of your night or day, if you're watching this on the playback, hope it's all top shelf. And Q Country Roads.